Welcome, everyone, to the EEBA webinar podcast series. Aaron Smith and Nancy Bakeman with the Energy and Environmental Building Alliance here. And we're really excited to have Jonah Sheen with WaterSense. We also learned that he grew up here in Minneapolis, which is fantastic. So we're commiserating about the cold months coming up. Many of you recall at our EEBA summit just a couple weeks ago, our main focus was water efficiency, and this has become a really critical issue. Jonah, I think I was proctoring a session, and we were talking about how much carbon impact just comes from water movement, and I had some data that it was maybe 3-4%. You're like, no, it's what was the number, like 8-10%?
Well, we're going to get into that. It's actually
Yeah,
not super clear. So yeah,
yeah.
we'll get into
So
the details.
I think this is a really topical conversation. We're really pleased to have you here, Jonah. We'll take questions in the Q&A section of today's uh, uh, Teams environment. You could also put them in the chat. I'll present those to Jonah throughout, but hopefully you have some questions that we can also save some for the end. With that being said, Jonah, welcome. We're glad to have you here today.
Thanks so much. Is screen sharing okay? Everyone can see my slides?
Looks great.
All right. So like Aaron said, and again, appreciate you having me here. We're going to talk about water and energy and carbon today. And we know that there's a lot of energy in water. It takes energy to move it, to treat it, to extract it, to pump it, to heat it. But the question really is how much. And as Aaron said a couple of weeks ago in Salt Lake City, he I think pegged at like 3 or 4%. And of course, kind of stuck my nose into it and made a face at him. And he justifiably said, "Oh, well, you tell me what it is." And like I said, the truth is we don't actually know exactly. If I were to give you an executive summary of all the data out there, it would be to say that it's a lot. We know that it's a lot. It's certainly enough that we really can't have any serious discussions about decarbonizing the building industry without addressing it, because of course, at the end of the day, our homes aren't a whole lot of good if we can't deliver water to them. So I put up some estimates on here. Again, there's this study out there that says about 20% of electricity in California is consumed by pumping, heating, and treating water. There's some additional estimates that peg total energy use in the U.S. for water at about 500 terawatt hours a year. That's about 14% of total consumption of electricity for 2020. There's other estimates, and maybe this is the one that Aaron was referring to. There's an estimate out there that says the water sector in general accounts for 4% of global electricity consumption.
So what you're saying, Jonah, is I wasn't totally wrong, but I also wasn't right.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. You certainly weren't completely wrong.
Right.
But this is, I think, one of the challenges when we talk about this issue, Aaron, right? Is that we tend to talk about it at this really high level. And yeah, there's, like I said, we know there's a lot of energy, and that's great. We know there's a lot of carbon because of that, and that's good to know as well. But to really make it sort of actionable, I think we need to get to maybe sort of more detailed level and a more granular understanding. So hopefully that's what we can talk about today. The other thing that we're not going to dig into a whole bunch, but I do want to acknowledge is that the opposite is also true, right? That we rely on water to generate electricity as well. And if you just look at sort of total withdrawals, so the total withdrawals in the U.S. based on 2015 data, the most recent year we have complete water withdrawal data from the USGS. We withdraw about 322 billion gallons of water a day. And yeah, the single largest use of that is for thermoelectric generation, right? We're using it, we're taking it, we're boiling it, we're using it to spin turbines and generate electricity. So it's a huge part of our water use profile is also the water that goes into our energy. That's 100% true. What I do sometimes see people doing, which is at best misleading, is looking at data like this and saying, okay, well, if we do the math on this, that means that there's about 13 gallons per kilowatt hour generated in the US. So if I save, say, a kilowatt hour of energy, that means I'm also saving 13 gallons of water. And that's not true. And the reason it's not true is that this is withdrawals, not consumptive use. Those are different things. When we withdraw water for thermoelectric power, we actually get most of that water back. It gets taken out, it gets used. Some of it's going to evaporate, it's going to be used for cooling and things like that. But a lot of it's going to get treated, cooled down, and released back into the water supply in more or less the same place that it came from. And the burden of that is all going to be felt sort of by private electric generation. So in other words, you're paying for that when you pay your electric bill. It kind of goes into the loaded cost. So again, to say that that saving a kilowatt hour of energy saves 13 gallons of water is, at the very best case, a little misleading. The other connection between water and energy that doesn't come out in this, because again, this is withdrawal, so only water that we've actually taken out of the system, is hydroelectric dams, which is actually one of the more consumptive users of water in the electric supply. And that's just because when you take water and you spread it out and increase the surface area, you really increase the evaporation. Again, that doesn't present itself here because we're not actually withdrawing that water from the reservoirs. It's just evaporating naturally after we've spread it out and increased the surface area quite a bit. But again, that is sort of a part of the puzzle. And increasingly, especially out west, I'm sure everyone read the 500-page impact assessment that Department of Interior released on the Colorado River earlier this year. But one of the sort of situations that they pointed out and considered and almost put forward as such a dire situation that it couldn't really possibly be considered a viable option was the idea that our dams would go to dead pool. Our reservoirs would go to dead pool, and the place where our dams would no longer be able to generate electricity. So, like I said, increasingly it's becoming an important part of our water management strategy, especially out west. But what we're really going to focus on today is the energy that goes into delivering water. And again, unlike, sorry, Anne, you have a clarifying question?
No, sir.
Oh, sorry. Unlike the water that's withdrawn for thermoelectric generation, which we largely get back, the energy that we use to deliver water and to treat it and get it to where we need it to be is gone once we use it. So let's take a little bit of a more granular look at what what makes up the total profile. From start to finish, the water that we're going to use to support our homes, support our communities, support our businesses starts with extraction. And all of these values are hugely variable. So are you getting that water from groundwater? Is it surface water? Where's it coming from, and what do we have to do to take it out of its source? Then it's usually not exactly where we need it to be. If it is, that's great. And certainly a lot of you probably live in communities where there's a water treatment plant that's right next to a river or something of the sort, or sitting right on top of a well field. There's a reason that we do that. It's because that makes it very easy to convey, to move the water from the source to the treatment plant. We're lucky to live in a country where the vast majority of us have access to clean water. That's because we're going to spend more energy treating it, and then we're going to distribute it to our homes. For some of the water, say water that we use outside, that's going to be the end of its story, at least as far as its energy profile goes. Not saying that it's the end of its story as far as the water cycle goes. It's going to infiltrate and become groundwater again. It'll run off and become, stormwater, but we're sort of done putting quantifiable energy into it to support our communities. Other of that water is going to come in and it's going to go down the drain, and it's almost going to have a second life of energy profile because we're going to spend energy collecting, pumping, and moving it to a wastewater treatment plant where it's going to have more water, more energy associated with it. And then there's also hot water. Of course, we know that there's a tremendous amount of energy that we spend heating water. It's one of the largest end uses of energy in a home. Anything that comes into our home and then gets heated is going to have an additional profile of energy use associated with it. Now, the bad news is that unfortunately, as far as energy intensity goes, so sort of the amount of energy it takes to move a gallon, or we think about these volumes in acre feet of water, large volumes of water. An acre foot of water is a foot of water stacked on an acre of land. It's about 325,000 gallons. So if you think of a football field and a foot of water stacked on top of it, again, horrible unit of measure, but it's what we use. Most of these are actually going up. They're becoming more energy intense. There's one that is going down, and a lot of you can probably guess it if anyone wants to take a stab at it. Aaron, you want to take a guess?
No, I don't dare anymore. Thank you, though.
Fair. I have myself to blame for that, but it's heating.
Okay.
Yeah, water heating is actually becoming more efficient. Two reasons. Once again, you'll probably guess one of them, which is that we're getting more efficient water heaters out. So we're getting heat pumps and higher UEF devices out. They do a better job of heating water more efficiently. The other reason that water heating is going down is, nationally speaking, our population keeps moving to warmer climates, and we spend less energy heating water in that part of the country. So we've got those two factors that are actually, again, looking at the national level, mean that we're spending fewer kilowatt hours heating water on a marginal basis than we used to. Otherwise, like I said, these are all getting more intense. A lot of that's because the low-hanging fruit is gone, right? So that water source that was right next to where you needed the water, it's probably already been tapped. It's already been sort of harvested to its maximum capacity. So now you're going to deeper wells, right? Deeper groundwater. It takes more energy to pump from a deeper well than it does from a shallow one. We can go further away, but again, that's going to increase the conveyance, increase the amount of energy we have to spend to get it where we need it to be. That also has an impact on quality. Usually communities are going to go to high quality sources of water first. They require less treatment. Lower quality sources require more treatment, so that means more energy. Communities are expanding. That's one of the challenges we face with infrastructure and water resources, so we have to pump it further away. And then on the wastewater side, there's many communities are having to deal with compliance enforcement issues from some crazy agency out there that is asking them to do a better job increasing the cleanliness of water after it leaves the wastewater treatment plant. So that's a good thing, because hopefully most of us are in favor of having clean water in our water systems, in our lakes, in our rivers, in our groundwater, but it does increase the amount of energy. So not only is this sort of a big issue, but it's something that's becoming more of an issue as time goes on, because these values tend to be going up. So here's a case study. Like I said, I think it's great to talk about these things. I'm not trying to belittle anyone to talk about them at this really high level, but I want to talk about it at a very detailed level. So I'm going to share a case study that we've done recently with our friends at KB Home. This is a community in Southern California. It's 219 WaterSense labeled homes. It's in Menifee, California. These homes are also, by the way, Energy Star certified and Zero Energy Ready and Indoor Air Plus. But this is my webinar, so we're going to highlight the fact that they're WaterSense labeled. That's how it's going to be. It is a microgrid community, so this is something that's important to know about it. It has community electric storage as well as electric storage on site in each of the homes. It also has very efficient water heaters, not just heat pumps, but really sort of top of the line as far as efficiency goes. Heat pump water heaters with a UEF of 4.07. So this is an extremely this is not only a water efficient community, but an extremely energy and carbon efficient community. And one of the things I think that's interesting why it's interesting to highlight this community is, despite all of the great technology that's gone in to trying to make it carbon neutral, well, how carbon neutral is it if we're relying on sort of the dirty grid to supply it with water? I would argue not so much. We'll dig into the actual numbers. Beyond that, the homes here, pretty typical looking homes. They're on average, they're 4 bedrooms, little over almost 2,300 square feet, 6,800 square foot lots, which is actually fairly large compared to a lot of what we see a lot of the times these days. And we estimate that these homes will use about 87,000 gallons of water a year each. They have an average HERS H2O score of 59, which puts them at about 61,000 gallons below the reference home, so below what we would expect code-built homes to use. So again, very water efficient community, very energy efficient community that's actually taken a lot of steps to address its carbon impact. And now here's what, if we look at sort of the energy that's just associated with water, well, the reference homes, so code-built homes, we'd expect that this community, 219 homes, to use a little over 750,000 kilowatt hours per year. So again, 219 homes, decent sized community. Of course, we're operating on the scale of thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of homes that we're building every year in this country. So you can extrapolate that impact quite a bit of what a typical use profile would be. And again, I've broken this down into the energy associated with each of those phases. Versus the rated homes, so the homes that have actually been built, only about 223,000 kilowatt hours of energy a year. And again, broken down for each of the phases, as you see. And again, we'll dig into exactly how we calculate this and exactly what's creating this impact. If you prefer to look at it in terms of carbon, for the reference home, for the code-built homes, we would be at over 400,000 pounds of carbon per year, whereas the rated homes are down here under 70,000 kilowatt hours per year. And again, that's because of all of that great energy efficiency technology, all of that great water savings that we've put into the homes to make them different than the code-built homes. So tremendous water savings, tremendous energy savings, and tremendous carbon savings, even though the impact on again on the grid, the energy demand, and the carbon generated is still pretty substantial. So let's talk about how we get to that estimate and how we're actually getting those savings in this community. There's three big pieces of information, right, to answer that question, more definitively of how much energy is in our water, so that we can show that Aaron is in fact 100% wrong and not just sort of wrong.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm just picking on you now at this point.
Right.
We've got to know sort of three big pieces of data. Again, big groups. One is we need to know where's the water come from, right? What's the mix of sources? Where are we getting it from? And when you turn on the tap and that gallon of water comes out, where's that water start its life, so to speak? We also need to know what's the energy intensity of those different sources, right? So does it come from under the ground beneath us, or does it come from way the heck upstate, and we had to pump it all the way down here? And then finally, because we need to know how the water is going to be used, we need to have pretty granular information on what the water use patterns are going to be in the individual homes. So we're lucky that this home is actually located in California, because we're able to access some of this data because of the reporting requirements in California that don't necessarily exist elsewhere in the country. This home's supplied with water by the Eastern Municipal Water District. And in California, every water district, every utility of a certain size has to publicly release a water management plan, which tells you exactly what sources of water they're using to supply their customers. So we know what the mix of water sources are in this instance. We're also lucky that in California, the California Public Utilities Commission, the PUC, actually publishes data they collect on the source energy intensity of those different water sources. And not only do they publish data on the energy intensity, but they do it on a geographically specific way. So if you're taking water from the Colorado River Aqueduct, it has a different energy signature if you're delivering it to Menifee, as opposed to if you're delivering it to the Imperial Valley. We have that data, and we have pretty granular information on the energy that's put in to those different phases of the water cycle, of the water supply cycle, because of it. And then finally, because these are WaterSense labeled homes, and they've gone through the HERS H2O rating, we get a lot of really detailed information on how we think the homes are going to use water from ResNet, as one of our home certification organizations who certifies homes on behalf of WaterSense. So we've got these sort of three big pieces of data available to us, and we can start to put this puzzle together and really answer that question of how much energy does go into the water use here. The question is, how do we start putting the puzzle together, right? We've established we've got these sort of data sources. How do we start digging into them? And if we look at, we'll start with the water sources. So this is what you'll find if you look at Eastern Municipal Water District and find out where the water comes from. For Southern California, this is pretty typical to have a variety of different water sources. A lot of communities elsewhere, well, they may only use one or two, and that would be typical of them. So this is highly variable. We are going to make an assumption here, which is that the water is proportional when it comes out. Now, if we went to Eastern Municipal on the operational side and we asked them and said, hey, well, what do you think what water are we using here? They might say, well, like we don't really have any intersystem connectivity between where we're desalinating brackish water and where these homes are. So you're probably not using any of that. Again, we're not going to go to quite that level of detail. We're still going to get a pretty specific estimate, assuming that the water is proportionally distributed. The other thing that we will do is you'll notice, like, well, over half the water is just sort of this category of water purchased from Met. The Met is the Metropolitan Water District. They're an importer and wholesaler of water, and they also have lots of different water sources. So it's not really helpful to know that you purchased water from the Met. We'll go ahead and we'll break that out based on the sources we know the Met has, because of course they also have a water management plan that we can access. And now we've got sort of all sorts of different water resources in place. So when we turn on the tap and a gallon of water comes out, it's got little pieces from all these different sources in it, some of which are quite local, some of which are from hundreds of miles away. And we can factor all of that in to the energy intensity that your typical gallon of water is going to have. I know I'm gonna flash some numbers at you. It's really just to show you the level of detail. I'm not expecting you to retain all of these, but we can now go to the PUC data, to the energy intensity data, and we can say, again, because of the location of these homes in Menifee, what is the energy intensity on a per acre foot basis, so per 325,000 gallons of water delivered for each of these phases from each of these sources. As you might imagine, Colorado River Aqueduct brings water east to west from the Colorado River to this part of the state. It has a very high intensity for extraction and conveyance because we have to move the water up over mountains and move it quite a ways. Same with the State Water Project. The State Water Project mostly brings water north to south across the state. This is probably something you're familiar with, right? This concept that we're providing, we're supporting communities in the Southwest by moving water along range, and certainly that has an impact on energy. Well, here are the numbers to actually show you that yes, in fact, that is happening. When you see numbers look really similar, that's just because the quality is quite similar. And so in the example, you see all these sources that have 205.3 kilowatt hours per acre foot of water for treatment. That's just because the quality is quite similar, and they're going to the same place and having the same type of treatment done to them. So again, fresh water has quite a low value for treatment. Things like recycled water or brackish water that needs to be desalinated, that has quite a higher intensity for treatment, even though its intensity for extraction and conveyance might be quite a bit lower, since it's inherently happening where you need it to be. Distribution, once it kind of all gets mixed together, it more or less, we're taking it to the same homes, so it's pretty uniform. The exception being recycled water, and I'll give people a chance to guess if they know why recycled water has a higher distribution energy intensity than other sources. Anyone want to take a stab at it? It's because it's mostly going uphill. Communities just sort of historically and naturally, yeah, more pumping. Yeah, you got it, right?
Don for
Means
the
more
win.
pumping. What's that?
Don for the win.
Yeah. So you
Nice.
nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we usually put treatment plants uphill, put wastewater treatment downhill so that we can use gravity to minimize this energy intensity. When we're treating wastewater and bringing it back to communities, we've got to go the opposite direction. Once it all gets mixed together as wastewater, it's all sort of the same. It's going to the same treatment plant. So flat 723 kilowatt hours per acre foot for that. So now we know where our water is coming from, and we know how much energy is in all of those different sources for each phase. And so we'll simply weight them, right? So if we've got, we'll 10% of our water, I'm making that number up, I don't remember what the exact number was, came from the Colorado River Aqueduct, then we'll assume that 10% of our water has the energy signature for each phase that we associated with the Colorado River Aqueduct. And these are the numbers that we get from that, right? So we're going to spend a little over 1,300 kilowatt hours per acre foot extracting and delivering the water to the community as a whole. Again, that's somewhat unique to where we're located, Southern California. A lot of communities don't have to, bring water from quite as far away as we are here, but it is the case in Menifee. So quite high energy intensity for extraction and conveyance. Treatment of 284 kilowatt hours per acre foot. Again, distributing pretty flat, 163. And then collecting wastewater and treating wastewater at the wastewater treatment plant. Heating, because remember, these are those very, very efficient heat pump water heaters. So this value, even though it's quite high compared to the rest of these, is way, way lower than it would be with a conventional technology. So we're actually really saving a lot. We're actually, in some ways, we're saving less because we're not spending as much energy on it. We would be reducing it more with water use reductions otherwise. But again, that value on a kilowatt hour per acre foot basis, a lot lower than it would have been otherwise. So now we've sort of got our weighted values for each phase of the water delivery process. We're going to break them up a little bit, right? As we talked about before, some water, like outdoor water use, we're going to deliver it, we're going to extract it, convey it, treat it, deliver it to our homes, but that's going to be the end of the story as far as its energy signature goes. So it's sort of the lowest, has the lowest value for embedded energy because we're never going to treat it as wastewater. We're never going to heat it up. Cold water that we use inside the home, so we'll just sort of classify this as indoor cold water use, is a little bit higher because we do have that added impact of wastewater treatment, and of course hot water that's been brought into the home, delivered, heated up, and then put down the drain for it to create wastewater is going to have the highest. I also put here what we would consider sort of very conservative national averages, just so you can see sort of how variable this is. Because of all those factors we talked about, because of all the different sources and how far away a lot of them are, this community is going to be way high on supply and wastewater, right? So we're significantly higher on these values compared to again, what we would consider a relatively conservative national average, but way lower on water that's been heated. And that's, again, not only because compared to the national average, this community is in quite a warm climate, doesn't have to heat water up quite as much, also doesn't have to, people aren't going to use quite as much hot water in the mix of hot and cold at the fixtures. And of course, because we have these super efficient heat pump water heaters, which are not the standard, unfortunately, out in the stock right now. So again, just to show you how variable this much more specific estimate is from what we would consider national averages. As I mentioned, we have to sort of ask this question now, well, how are these homes going to use water? And because they're water sense labeled, because they've got the HERS H2O rating, we're able to craft a pretty granular picture of how we expect the reference homes, code-built homes, would have used water versus how the actual homes, the rated homes, use water. You see the substantial energy savings, water savings that we're able to achieve from them. And you also notice that the proportions, right, the end uses as a percentages actually remain relatively constant. That's just tells us that the savings is relatively evenly distributed across indoor and outdoor use and across the various indoor end uses. It's lower overall, of course, but we're using a lot less water. We're just still using it in the same sort of proportionality. We can simplify this a little bit, though, and really just break it down to those three big categories. So looking at outdoor water use, cold water use, and hot water use, and you can see the reduction in each of these sort of broad categories of water use. I should also note, just that there's some other data that we use on simplifying things a little bit. We do need to know not just the energy intensity, but also the carbon intensity of that energy. We use the EPA, my agency, has a tool called the eGrid tool, which, similar to what we're doing for the mix of water sources, has a similar approach, and they have regionally specific carbon intensities for energy that's saved or energy that's generated on the electric grid, on the electricity grid. We also, sorry, missing something here. Go back. As I mentioned before, we do need to know the mix of the temperature of incoming water, and we get that from the HERS H2O rating. That impacts the mix of hot and cold. People like to shower around 105 degrees. The variability there is actually not huge. People get really defensive about this, right? Some of you probably like really hot showers, some of you probably like really cold showers. And for whatever reason, that seems to be like a core part of people's self-identity. If you like hot showers, that means you shower at like 106. And if you like cold showers, that means you shower at like 103. The spread isn't huge because the range of what human being it's comfortable to human being isn't all that huge. What is big is the percent of hot water that you have to mix into that. So, Aaron and Nancy living in Minnesota in the winter, their mix of hot water in order to get to that 105 is going to be significantly greater than it is at any time of year for these homes in Southern California. And then that will also impact the temperature rise. So it's really cold outside, water's going to come into the home a lot colder. That means the water heater is going to have to work a lot harder. So we need that information. Obviously, we do need the efficiency of the water heater. We're just getting that from the spec. And then we're making some assumptions too. Number one, we're kind of being generous to the microgrid, and we're going to assume that all of the electricity used on site is provided by renewables and by the microgrid, and it's carbon neutral. That's certainly not the case right now because the community is still being built out. Will it be the case in the future? That sort of remains to be seen. We're going to assume that it is to make sure that we're not overstating the carbon savings. And then, as I mentioned before, we're also going to assume that all water supplied is proportionally mixed based on system averages. Might not be the case if we really dug into it and looked at an operational level, but still a pretty detailed estimate that we're crafting. And once again, going to throw a whole bunch of numbers at you. Again, I don't expect you to absorb them all, but just to show you the level of detail that we're able to collect and break this down. Significant energy savings, significant carbon savings that we saw before. The other reason that it's important to be able to break this down phase by phase is that if we want to look at reducing water consumption as a tool to helping us save energy and address carbon, we need to know where it's happening. Because remember, extraction and conveyance is frequently happening hundreds of miles away from these homes, right? And that's why the energy savings has the impact on carbon that it does. Because even though this community has its super green, sustainable microgrid, we're not pulling off that energy to extract and convey this water. We're pulling off the sort of quote unquote conventional dirty grid. So we're kind of putting them all together for the savings to show the impact, but certainly when we talk about, well, where are we going to save this energy and how do we impact it, how do we affect it, it's important to know where it's coming from and that we can do it, again, on a phase by phase basis and really dig into where the savings is happening. I also thought this would be interesting. So it's, you can't totally separate out the savings, right? So one of the things when I've that KB wanted to know, our partner KB Home, who built the homes, when I first shared this analysis with them, is they want to know, well, how much of the savings is coming from the microgrid versus the heat pump water heaters versus the fact that they're WaterSense labeled. And it's kind of a theoretical, I mean, it's almost a philosophical question, because, well, what comes first? Do we reduce the water use first, or do we make the water heating more efficient first? You can't totally separate those things, but I put the savings up comparing these sort of three strategies: so the microgrid, the heat pump water heater, and the water efficiency. And if we were to just look at the impact they'd have from the reference, so from sort of standard, typical code-built construction, and maybe this is the order you'd pick them at in terms of carbon savings, but the microgrid, of course, that doesn't actually save any electricity, but it does save a lot of carbon because we're still using the same amount of electricity. We're just pulling it off of a carbon neutral source. So no energy savings, but substantial carbon savings. The heat pump water heaters, again, if we were to put those compared to the reference, so pull off the dirty grid, use code-built home amount of water, and do nothing else but change the water heaters to these super efficient heat pumps. We get substantial energy savings and substantial carbon savings, which is great. And then finally, water efficiency. If we were to do nothing else, just make these homes WaterSense label, just make them use water more efficiently, pull off the dirty grid, use code-built water heaters, we'd be looking at about 223,000, almost 224,000 kilowatt hours per year, and 120,000 pounds of carbon. So again, maybe that's sort of the order we'd expect them to be in. But I'd also ask the question, well, how much did each of these solutions cost? Because the truth is, we have limited resources in this country, and we have a lot of problems that compete for those resources. I promise you that water efficiency is cost less than half the cost of these heat pump water heaters, by a lot less, right? So it really gets at this point that if we're trying to save energy, well, water efficiency is actually a really cost-effective way to do that. And actually, we've seen this before. Not this past drought we just went through, but the 2015-2016 drought. Governor Davis, had this executive order. He said, "Okay, everybody, cut water use because we need you to do it. No choice at this point. You got to do it." And most of the water districts responded, and they did a good job doing it. My friends at UC Davis took all that information, added it up, and they said, "Hey, guess what? Like all of this water saving actually saved a lot of energy." In fact, what they found was that it saved slightly more energy than all of the state's energy efficiency programs combined. Wow. And remind you, this is California, right? This is not like a state that's not known for investing in energy efficiency. But what I think is even more striking is look at the dollars they spent on it. Even in this really sort of unfortunately, this is sort of becoming one of those things, right? It's like a once in a lifetime drought that seems to happen every 5 years. But man, like we, the money that we spent on the energy efficiency programs, we saved about 2.7 kilowatt hours per dollar spent on those. And I have a feeling that would be pretty comparable if we looked at it nationally of what our energy efficiency programs spend and the return they get in terms of energy savings. We got 10.3 kilowatt hours saved per dollar spent on water savings. And again, it really just underscores this program that this point that we've seen it again and again. Water efficiency really is one of the more cost-effective tools we have for energy efficiency. And if that doesn't, again, underscore the point that I was making and that Aaron was making, that there's a lot of energy in water, and yes, we can save energy by saving water, then I don't know what does. So, we're starting to see people look at this a little bit more. I pulled the ESG reports, or the sustainability reports from a couple of our partners recently. This is KB Home, who we just talked about on the right, and Kohler, who, as many of you probably know, is a large plumbing manufacturer. And they both talk about this issue of, yes, we've, our participation in the WaterSense program and everything we've done to save water, but hey, this has also saved a bunch of energy. They've both used a tool that we have. So if you're a WaterSense partner, this is available to you. We call it the Partner Savings Calculator because we did it last year for the first time, right around the time that people started to sour on the term ESG. So we didn't want to put ESG in the title, but it's pretty simple to use. On the back end, though, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of data. We pull a lot of the nuts and bolts out of this, out of the WaterSense National Water Savings model, which is what we use when you see me or someone else from WaterSense talk, and we talk about, hey, like the program saved all of these, trillions of gallons of water and all this energy and all this money. This model is what we use, and we invest in it really heavily in WaterSense because we think it's important to have those numbers and have that feedback. We write peer-reviewed papers on it. It's been the subject of a we have an internal watchdog at EPA, as most government agencies do, the Inspector General. They've investigated us for this. We had the most glowing investigation results that you've ever seen from an Inspector General report. They just, not only could they not find anything wrong with it, that one of their main recommendations was that other programs should look to emulate what we had done with the National Water Savings Model, and we update it every year. Right, so that's the plan with the savings calculator as well. That we'll update it year by year. It works in a couple of modules. This is for just in case we have any manufacturers or retailers on the call. So this is what the module will look like. Again, just very simple. Tell us the number of products that you've labeled and shipped on a year-by-year basis. For builders, we do want to know it broken down on state because, of course, we there's the huge climate factor involved. Also, what a lot of our builder partners tell us is that they want to be able to quantify. Maybe you're a builder who has most of their divisions certifying homes to WaterSense, but you haven't gone sort of all the way in all of the divisions, but those divisions are still using WaterSense labeled plumbing products. That's fine. We'll help you quantify those as well. And then we'll give you the results in gallons, in energy, in tons of carbon, and in USD to really give you the full picture and the full impact. Now, that being said, as I mentioned, because these are national, we are regionalizing a lot of the estimates, but largely speaking, these are national estimates. I think they're tremendous underestimates. We do that because we obviously want to make sure that the numbers are unassailable, so to speak. We don't want anyone coming at our partners and saying, hey, this is an overstatement. It's certainly we've only done this for a year, right? So this is just the second year. And Aaron, I think Gene had mentioned this in that session. This is the tool he was talking about.
That's right.
But what a lot of our partners tell us is what they really like is that it's easy to defend these numbers because it does come from an EPA tool. So, builders have pretty litigious legal departments a lot of the time, as do large manufacturers. When they come and they say, well, where'd you get these numbers? You can just sort of say, well, we just put our data into the tool. This is what EPA said. So we want to stay on that conservative side. But I just put this comparison up, and this is this analysis that I just went through on the top, which is much more granular and much more detailed. And what you'd get if you just put 219 WaterSense labeled homes into California on the bottom line. So pretty close, a little bit closer in terms of water. Again, the tool, we assume that you're at the minimum 30%. To be a WaterSense labeled home, you have to be 30% better than code. These homes were about 40% just because of how the modeling worked out. So maybe this number is actually fairly consistent, but you see how sort of much we underestimated the energy and the carbon savings in this instance. So like I said, I put that up to show you just sort of how conservative I think the estimates are, but also, by way of discussion, because hopefully we have a lot, hopefully partners on the call today. This tool has a Goldilocks problem. I can put more detail into it. My staff and I and our team can put more detail into the tool, but then you're going to have to enter a lot more information. And what's the trade-off there, right? Just about every builder I've ever met would like more detail on the outputs, but they don't want to put any more detail in on the inputs. That makes you pretty normal, but it's a little bit hard to do both of those things at the same time. So I was shooting for 45 minutes. I think I was pretty close to on the nose, so that we have some time for questions.
Great. Jonah, I think the first question is, so how do we think about water? Is it operational carbon or is it embodied carbon?
To me, this is all operational, right?
Yeah.
Because this is,
right.
Yeah, I mean, this is the impact that's going to happen as people are in the homes living there, turn that off, living there, going about their daily business, just living their lives, right? I mean, this is distinctly the operational phase of the home.
Right.
So that's how I view it.
I think initially when I thought about operational carbon, I was thinking, just get rid of all the fuel burning sources in the house and you're good to go. But now you've introduced this new category of operational carbon that we need to think about.
Right.
So interesting.
Yeah.
The other question that came up was the desalination number actually seemed like it was lower than the wastewater treatment number. If that is indeed the case, why are we not building more desalination plants? Because I've always heard, oh, desal is so incredibly energy intensive that you don't even want to do it.
Yeah. So let's clarify that the desal they're doing here is brackish water and not seawater.
Okay.
So with desalination, the saltier the water, the more energy you're going to have to spend to do it. So
have you
quite.
Have you run numbers yet? I know we had a big desal plant in Redondo Beach, California. It's not close to the community that you looked at, but what is if we had a true seawater desalination plant, where does that fall on the spectrum?
Yeah. Well, and I wasn't going to point out, and even with this brackish water that's being desalinated, you got to look at the treatment, right?
That's okay, it's not just the extraction conveyance.
Yeah, because that's not so much greater than sort of like another local source, but it's the treatment that's going to get you on the energy intensity. But again, still not bad, right? When we add it all up, this still puts desalinated quite a bit lower all in than say like the State Water Project, because it's coming so far.
Yeah.
I haven't looked, and I haven't had this. We've done this type of analysis on a few different communities in California. We just haven't had the opportunity to do it in a district that does get like water from like Carlsbad or one of the seawater desalination projects that's happening. It'd be a good thing to look at. I have a feeling what you'd see is that this treatment number would be way higher.
Okay.
And again, I mean, and that's something that comes up time and time again when we talk about water supply and planning. You want the water, we'll get you the water. You're not going to like what it costs.
Right.
And a big part of that cost discussion is the energy.
That's right. Well, it's incredible to me that in your numbers, it's almost 1 pound of CO2 for 1 gallon of water. It's close.
It's getting up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's significant.
It's significant. So, Jonah, I want to thank you for opening our eyes to this. I want to congratulate you and the EPA on an incredible new tool. I don't know if you want to put that slide back up on where to go if people want to download the tool. So I think that's
the one, if you really want to see it,
Well,
the,
maybe just your contact information on the last
yeah,
page.
we make it a partner tool. We put it on our partner site,
Yeah,
which not everyone inherently has access to. If you're
yeah.
not a partner and you're eligible to be a partner, be a WaterSense partner. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. We'd love to have you, and then you'd have access to the tool. If you really want to see it and you're not a partner, then shoot me an email. I can probably get you a copy. It's not, we're not trying to keep it a secret. It's just that how we distribute it is through our partner site.
But pretty low hurdle. Everybody should be thinking about being a WaterSense partner. It's
I like to
great
think so.
tool, great tool and resource. Jonah, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate you having me.
You bet.